So good evening, everyone, and welcome to the first edition of our Know to Prevent virtual speaker series for 2023 and 24. Know to Prevent is a collaboration of youth-focused coalitions and agencies in Westchester, working together to provide parents and caregivers with essential tools to increase resilience, reduce risky behaviors, and reduce risky behaviors among our youth. For more information on the collaborative and upcoming presentations, as well as recordings of prior presentations, you can visit us at knowtoprevent.org. Before we get started tonight, I think it's important, and we would be remiss if we did not acknowledge how fortunate we are to be here in the safety and comfort of our homes. Maybe in our PJs with our kids annoying us in the background, doing their homework and asking questions and eating dinner. And that the things that we're worried about are things like screen time and how to get them to do their homework when they don't want to. And we're not worried about whether or not a bomb will destroy our home or that our loved ones will go missing. Our thoughts are with those in Israel and Gaza and Ukraine and all around the world where there is war, and with those here at home who are worried about the safety of their loved ones. Tonight's presentation, just by way of a few little matters of housekeeping, is being recorded. Participants will receive a link to the recording along with a handout that we call the tip jar. The tip jar highlights key takeaways, information, and prompts from tonight's speaker for you to have for your reference. Our speaker will address questions as we go along tonight. So please feel free. We have some that came in from folks as they registered, but please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A. Use the Q&A feature, please, on your computers. And Dr. Collier and or Alice or myself will respond to any questions or needs that you have, but Dr. Collier will respond to questions as we go along. During each speaker event, we highlight one of our presenting sponsor coalitions. It's my pleasure to turn things over now to my friend and colleague Alice Joslow from the Ossining Communities That Care Coalition. She'll introduce our speaker.
Thanks, Nancy. And I'm so happy to be here. And I also appreciate your comment before about all the pressure facing so many people, the concerns all around the world right now. Ossining Communities That Care is a community coalition based at the Open Door Family Medical Center. And our mission is to empower, educate, and enrich and promote happy, healthy lifestyles for Ossining's youth. We're dedicated to the long-term health and well-being of our youth and their families. So we are so fortunate. I can't tell you how excited I am about this speaker. I've seen a lot of parenting speakers. My kids are 30, 33, and 35, okay? And I've seen a lot of parenting speakers. This woman, Dr. Crystal Collier, is absolutely one of the best parenting speakers I have ever seen. I wish I had met her and she had written her book and I could have used it when I was a parent of teenagers. So she's a therapist, a prevention researcher, and an educator named Counselor of the Year in 2019 by the Houston Association of Counselors. Crystal specializes in empowering parents to protect children's developing brains. In her parent book, The Neuro Whereabouts Guide, and her website, knowyourneuro.org, which you'll all learn about at the end of her presentation, she teaches neurodevelopmental effects of 18 different high-risk behaviors, prevention strategies, and brain-based parenting techniques. She has created an amazing website with huge resources, and every parent should have this tattooed in their brain when they have a question. So Crystal, thank you so much, and I look forward to your talk.
Oh, Alice, thank you so much. I am blushing over here. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so equally a fangirl of you guys and the work that you're doing. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, which will stop sharing yours. And I'll pop it over to mine. Okay, great. Now we're ready to go for this. Okay, so welcome you guys. Thank you so much for being here tonight. I feel really honored to be able to host this with you guys. You guys heard about my professional qualifications. I want to start by sharing with you some of my what I think are really qualifies me to talk about this particular subject. And so, by the way, I made up a word, neuro whereabouts. My book is called The Neuro Whereabouts Guide. And tonight we're going to talk about knowing your child's neuro whereabouts, which is really knowing what neurodevelopmental stage your child is in and using brain-based parenting techniques to protect it and increase those skills. So the way that I got into this business is that I started off as a high risk behavioral kid. These pictures of me growing up, that second one in, I was about 12, 13 years old when my parents got a divorce and we moved to a new city. I started taking summer school classes to get to know kids because I thought that was a good idea. But I met a lot of really great kids who were making bad decisions and started drinking alcohol. By the time that third picture was taken of me in the awesome feathered hair, I was about 16 years old. And that's the year that I started using intravenous drugs. Cocaine in a needle was my drug of choice. I was always a very smart kid, made all A's, and of course took a lot of summer school classes to get to know people because we moved a lot. And I graduated when I was 16 and a half years old, really, went straight into college, graduated to bigger and better risky behavior. And by the time I was 18, I had a pretty bad overdose and called my mom and said, I need some help. And she helped me get into Charter Hospital in Corpus Christi, Texas. And this awesome big Texas hair picture of me at the very end, I have on a t-shirt that says drug-free body. I still have that t-shirt today. My sobriety birthday is February 3rd, 1989. And when I started to recover that first year and a half, my brain was so foggy. And when the fog lifted, I just had blankets of shame wrapped around. I couldn't understand why I made such terrible decisions. And so when I got back into school, I started studying. And it was a really cool period of time because all of these neat fMRI studies were being published. This one up there was published in 1999. And so as they were being published, I was reading about all this, and it was really helping me understand why this good, smart, cute, great kid made such terrible decisions. And so that's when I started thinking, I got to tell parents about this. And so as I became a therapist and started treating kids, I started doing presentations at the places that I was working, and it just kind of worked into creating a prevention program for a local school here in Houston. We had some really great supporters and funders, and we got to expand the program. It's still being done at that school all these years later, and it's also expanded to about 40 schools here in Houston. And I kept thinking, okay, how can I get this to be bigger? I want more kids and parents to know this. And that's why I created Know Your Neuro, which I'll take you for a spin at the end. But when I finally started to understand why I had made all those decisions, I started teaching it to other parents. But parents ask me this question a lot. Is it really that bad? I mean, I drank in high school and I'm okay, or I smoked weed when I was in college and I'm fine. And here's how I answer this question with some really beautiful research that originated out of CASA. I know that we've got some old CASA people in the audience here, so thank you very much for coming. But I learned about this statistic in a chart that I'm about to show you. 90% of adults diagnosed with substance use disorders began using when they were teens. But I also found out that the same percentage of people who get diagnosed with mental health issues began experiencing those symptoms when they were kids. So let me show you this particular chart, which is one of my favorites, so much so that I actually put it in the introduction section in my book. But it really shows us the power of waiting. We know that the younger we are when we start using, the greater our risk of growing up and struggling with substance use disorders. But we can also see by this beautiful slope down that if we just delay substances until it's legal to use them in many places, we almost completely eliminate our risk. We see a huge reduction in risk, even if you have the genetics as well. So this gives you really great scientific justification to have the rule of no substances. A lot of parents will say to me, oh, but they're all going to do it. I mean, how can I keep them from doing it? And that is what I want to do. I want to empower you to create really good rules, love, limits, all kinds of different things that you can do as a parent as your kids' brains are developing so that you can prevent or delay experimentation or use. I want to show you a graphic that I found very interesting as I was studying mental health. I learned that almost every single major mental health disorder has an onset of symptoms in either elementary, middle, or high school. This is also in the introduction section of my book. And so very important to remember, these things start young. So when I kept wondering, okay, what's going on during this time that makes us so fragile? Of course, you guys know it's about development. And so that made me want to learn everything I can about childhood development, which is just not taught uniformly to parents. So I wanted to try to rectify that as much as I could and teach parents how to be brain savvy. So I like to make really complicated brain science so easy to understand and apply. So I'm hoping that you'll be able to apply these things tomorrow when you're parenting your kids. So the first thing to know is that the brain goes through two major neurodevelopmental stages. The first one happens at about a birth to 11 and 12. So that first phase of brain development is the phase when we grow 200 billion neurons in the brain. So it's kind of like we get this big chunk of clay, and then at puberty, the brain stops neuronal growth and it starts pruning away cells to make room for connectors. So between puberty and about 24, 25, we end up losing half of our neurons. This was so surprising to me because I kept thinking, wait a second, these are perfectly good brain cells. Why do we lose half of them? This is really wild. What is the purpose? So we need room. Basically, we need room to grow two things. So here's a really cool picture of a neuron, a graphic depiction of a neuron. And the first thing that you might notice is that this long axon is covered by this fatty tissue called myelin. You may remember from biology class when you were younger, they call it the myelin sheath. Well, myelin actually helps the electrical impulse move down the cell, and the thicker the myelin is, the faster processor you are. And so that myelin really starts to thicken between puberty and about 25. Now, as our processing speed, which is just the fancy term for how quickly we think, goes up, the myelin is really thickening. By the time we're 25, our processing speed actually peaks. We are the fastest thinkers we're ever going to be at 25 years old. Now, we learn more information and use it, but our processing speed starts to slowly go downhill thereafter as we age. And so we want our kids to have the fastest processing speed they can have by the time they're 25. Now, that's just one thing that needs room to grow. The other thing that needs room to grow are these things at the end of the neuron called dendrites that reach out to other cells, making long networks of connections. Dendrites are my favorite brain structure. So I want your battle cry as a parent to be dendrites, dendrites, dendrites. Let me make the case for this. Dendrites are literally the hardware of learning. Literally, you guys, every time you learn something new, you grow new dendrites. Every time you practice a skill, you grow new dendrites. Let me show you. This is a magnified picture of a little infant's neuron, a little baby neuron. And so you can see the cell body, the long axon that gets covered with myelin, and then what looks like tree branches and tree roots. Yep, those are dendrites. And as you can see, as this baby's neurons grow all the way up to age 2, wow, you can see the thickening, you can see the connections. And this is just age 2. By the time we're 25 years old, every neuron in our brain is connected to 10,000 other neurons. Now, that's a lot of connections. And of course, they have to fit into our skull. And so what I learned about that is that when that happens, it's literally what makes all those funky wrinkles and grooves in our brain. Babies actually have a much smoother brain. And as we grow, we get those wrinkles, which means we're compacting all of these networks into our brain. These are really good wrinkles. Let me show you what it looks like. One of my favorite classic studies, the researchers let me republish this in my book. It's just such a beautiful study of a healthy adolescent's brain as they grow. And of course, as you see, the darker the color, the less gray matter, which is the nickname for the cells. But we're growing more white matter, those connectors, those dendrites. And so the darker the color means you've got more and more and more thicker connections. So we found out from these studies that this thickening primarily happens behind our forehead, about halfway up our skull. And of course, we all know that's the frontal lobe or the prefrontal cortex. You can see we have one when we're young, but it's really primitive and immature. Then you can see when we hit that second big stage of neurodevelopment around age 11, 12, it's really starting to thicken. We've got about 10 to 15% of our adult brain by that age. This is such a fun age. I love middle schoolers because they have just enough frontal lobe to start arguing with you incessantly because their abstract reasoning comes online, but they don't have enough frontal lobe yet to understand how irritating it is for you to be the target of all that arguing. By the time we're 16, we've got about 45% of our adult brain, which is really kind of wild because we give them a license to drive with half a brain, which is literally why our insurance rates are so high. But then we get to age 20. I don't know about you guys, but I thought I was grown at 17. Come to find out, you only have 80% of your frontal lobe online by 20. There's a whole fifth of brain development to go between 20 and 25. Now, here is a critical point that every parent and caregiver needs to know. All of these connectors, all of this growth is based upon the brain's rule. Brain's rule is use it or lose it. So what this means is that the networks your brain is using, those are the ones that stay and make more dendrites and more connections for longer networks. The networks you're not using literally atrophy and get sloughed off to make room for the connectors and the networks you are using. So if all of this growth follows the brain's rule, what do we want to make sure they use? We want to make sure they use their executive functioning skills. So the frontal lobe has been nicknamed the CEO of the brain and the body because it does all of your basic thinking, feeling, and doing skills. And here are the lists as they show up in each stage of neurodevelopment. So I actually have this laminated in my office, and we're going to talk about this page for quite a while. This page and all about what's in this is in the second chapter of my book on healthy brain development. Now, what I want you guys to do as parents is memorize these. and there's not tons of them. So it's easy to actually memorize. The lists are there. You can have my slides. What I want you to do is start to use brain-based praise when you see your child engaging in one of these skills. So what happens when we praise a behavior? The behavior goes up. But what we know is true is that when our kids age, as age goes up, praise actually goes down. I mean, when they're potty training, we're like, woo, let's throw a party. And then, when they're 16 and they aced a test, you're like, great, let's eat. Like it changes as our kids get older. So remember to start instituting these. So this is what I do in session with my clients, with adults and kids. So I will say, okay, rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being that you got this, it's an awesome skill. 1, you might suck and need some help. This is a really great exercise because when you discuss this with kids, rate your impulse control on a scale of 1 to 10. A lot of times they will be very honest with you, and then you can create a plan for increasing that skill. But I read a lot about brain-based, about praise, in particular 2 kinds. One is performance-based praise. Attaboy, nice job. That is a wonderful way to praise your kids. But if you primarily use performance-based praise, you run the risk of increasing performance anxiety. The second kind of praise that I studied when I was researching the book is IQ-based praise. So telling your kid, oh, you're so smart, no problem. This will be so easy for you because you're so intelligent. This is wonderful praise as well. But if you primarily use performance-based praise, you run the risk of a child failing at something and attributing their failure to not being smart enough. So I want you to use a little bit of performance, a little bit of IQ, and a lot of brain-based praise. So here is what it sounds like. It's important that you make this your own hip, slick, and cool language, because you don't want to say, nice task initiation, Johnny. Your kid's going to be like, who are you, mom? And bring back the mom I know. So let's give you some examples of what this sounds like. Dude, you took out the trash and I didn't even have to remind you. Nice. That would be a great way of praising task initiation. Man, I love how you organized that. Tell me how you did it. Wow. You figured out the most important thing to do right away. Wow, that was good EF skills. I really love how this week you can control your impulses. Like 2 weeks ago, you'd have been like, bam, spending your allowance like that. But this week, you really delayed gratification. The way you solved that problem was phenomenal. Tell me how you got those steps in your head. Ooh, nice decision. Good judgment. You know what? 3 weeks ago, you would have been so mad at me about this. This week, you calmed down really, really quickly. I appreciate that regulation. Nice. And, today you showed me really sweet empathy. I really appreciate that. Or it might sound like, kid, I needed you to show me more empathy today. This is what brain-based praise sounds like. Teach your child what an executive functioning skill is. Discuss the ones they do well, talk about and make a plan to increase the other ones. Remember, these are your basic thinking, feeling, and doing skills. There is one in this list that is the #1 predictor of adult success. It is in the right-hand column. Anybody guess what that might be? If you guessed impulse control, you would be right. A couple great studies out of Stanford University, the marshmallow test, that study's been replicated quite a few times. What we see is that impulse control has been shown time and time again to be the #1 predictor. You can be so smart and have tons of money, but if you don't have good impulse control, and remember, all of these are based on the brain's rule. So if you are an over-functioning parent and solve all your problems and make decisions for your kids, they're not going to grow long networks of neurons for problem solving and decision making. but they will grow long networks for dependency on you to solve all their problems and make their decisions. So remember, brain-based praise, memorize these skills and start using them in your own hip, slick, and cool language. Okay. This is a 4-part series. We just finished, or 4-part presentation. We just finished part 1. Let's move into part 2. Part 2 is how does risky behavior affect the brain while we're growing and developing it? And in order to answer this question, we got to talk about the limbic system, which is the part of the brain that most of us know is the fight or flight survival part, the primitive reacting, non-thinking part of our brain that mobilizes when we need to protect ourselves. But it also figures out what we need to feel pleasure and to keep a homeostatic balance. That's what we're going to focus on, is that pleasurable experience. Now, in order to do that, your brain expresses a neurotransmitter called dopamine. Tons of other neurotransmitters, hormones, and peptides that our body makes and expresses, but primarily the neurotransmitter that signals reward, or when we're doing something that's salient for our survival, is dopamine. And of course, it makes you feel calm and happy. And so when you have not eaten for, let's say, 7-8 hours, you missed breakfast, forgot lunch, got so busy, it's like 7, 8, 9 o'clock, you're feeling pretty moody, hangry, tired, listless. Your limbic system is depleting itself of dopamine. It's basically saying, dude, you need to go do something good for my survival. And until you do, I'm going to make you feel pretty uncomfortable. But then, as soon as you eat, you get 100% increase in dopamine. Your brain says, good job keeping me alive. Here's your reward. Feel calm and happy. We'll do it all again in like 4 or 5 hours. There are other human behaviors that we engage in that also increase dopamine. Sex increases it by 150%. Now your limbic system is saying, hey, this is really good for your survival and your species survival, which is why you get more. But there are substances and behaviors out there that can spike dopamine levels way too high. For instance, cocaine can spike dopamine levels up to 350%. And in this NIDA study, methamphetamine spiked it up to 1100%. Recently, some research came out that showed that heroin can spike dopamine levels up to 1300%. When I tried to put that bar into this bar graph, you couldn't see food or sex anymore. And I thought, man, that really makes sense. Because if you've ever known someone who became addicted to opioids or heroin, one of the first things they stop doing is eating, having healthy relationships with the people they love, because now their brain has a new set point. And it now believes that that body needs that drug way more than those other things for survival. Remember, the limbic system is not a thinker. That's the frontal lobe. The limbic system is just a reactor. It does this simple calculation. Like when cocaine goes into the body, the limbic system's like, whoo, I get 250% more dopamine than when you put food in my system. So that must mean whatever this was is 250% better for my survival than that stuff. Now, the part of the brain that knows that's not true is altered during this time. So here's what you need to know. Everybody has something called a hedonic threshold, what's called a pleasure threshold, how much your dopamine can go up at any given time from baseline. And it's about a 200% increase is our normal natural hedonic threshold. And we go up and down within that threshold all day. We get hungry, our dopamine plummets. We eat, it goes back up. We get lonely and bored. We go hang out with friends. We go to the gym. This is our normal natural hedonic pleasure threshold. When we stay below this line, our body keeps us in a beautiful, happy state of homeostasis. The danger is when we go above the threshold. Two things happen. Let me show you a video of the first one. This is a simulation of what this might look like. If we travel deep inside the limbic system and look at those neurons that are expressing dopamine, dopamine will come across the synapse, bind to the little receptor sites on the dendrite, pass along the signal down, and so on and so on. But if you engage in a substance that depletes the cell of its dopamine, it can't produce the same amount for hours, days, maybe even weeks thereafter. This is why we know that as high a drug will take you, it can take you equally as low. And it can take a long time for your brain to replenish its dopamine stores depending upon the substance or the behavior you engaged in. Now, that's a structural issue that actually can heal itself pretty quickly. The second structural issue can't. When we expose our neurons to too much dopamine, here is a simulated dendrite with receptor sites on it. These are called spindle dendrites. Now, what you see is the learning that's going on. When somebody really exposes their brain to way too much dopamine, all of these extra receptor sites start growing. More and more receptor sites in the brain continue to grow and reach out to other areas in the brain, like the frontal lobe, that tell your frontal lobe, ooh, this is really good for your survival. You should attach to this. This is why a lot of addicts and alcoholics get very attached to their drug of choice, because of this learning that takes place. But here's the issue. You guys can probably see it. The more and more receptor sites that you have for dopamine, but when all those receptor sites are inactive because the dopamine leaves your system, you've expressed it all and your body's waiting and waiting and waiting for more, you can see all those extra receptor sites that are now craving. So let's say somebody starts smoking weed, and this is pretty potent marijuana on the streets today. They grow a few extra receptor sites and dendrites, and now the next time they smoke, they may experience that they didn't get the same exact high that they did the first time, so they use a little bit more. And then a few months later, they're using maybe more frequently, or a type that's more potent, but each time they do, they grow a few more receptor sites until one day there's just one more too many. And that's when we cross that invisible line into addiction. The bad news about this structural change is you can't really heal from it. Once these structures are grown, you can't ungrow them. What the researchers think happens is that over time, these extra receptor sites kind of become inactive and we go back to our normal baseline levels. But all of these structures are just in there waiting for a little extra dopamine and they start popping open again, which is why once somebody relapses, it's harder to stop each time they relapse, and why it takes a long time to actually heal the brain. These structures have to really figure out, oh, I'm not getting that dopamine anymore. Okay, so if we move on to one more thing that I want to share with you guys is that this hedonic pleasure threshold is the hedonic threshold for most people out in the world. But if you're like me, thanks mom and dad, and I got a lot of genetics, a genetic predisposition for addiction. And so that is not my hedonic threshold. Mine is much lower, that red line, because of something called RDS, reward deficiency syndrome. Dr. Kenneth Blum from UT, actually here in Houston, started discovering some of these genetic polymorphisms many, many years ago. And we now know that there is a combination of gene exposure. If you think about genes as like a pie chart of about 30,000 genes on our genetic expression on our double helix. And then we took a slice of that pie. About 2,200 of these that we currently know of are linked to addiction, impulse control problems, and mental health illness. Whatever combination of those polymorphisms that you have might put you into a different risk category. And it also means that those genes don't express the same amount of neurotransmitters, hormones, and peptides that other people do. I got my genetic test read. Unfortunately, that company that I got it done at went under during COVID, but I got to do mine and found out that all of my dopamine receptor sites are downregulated and low, which means my genes tell my body to actually express less dopamine than other people do. That's when I started doing some research on methylfolate and started taking some different supplements to help my brain make a little bit more, because I make less dopamine than other people do, which is the neurotransmitter that makes you feel calm and happy when you do normal things for your survival. And we can spot almost by just looking at them and knowing those kids. You know, they might be the sensation-seeking kind of kid who's always looking for that dopamine hit, whereas other kids, maybe they just don't seek those things out because they might have normal levels of dopamine and other neurotransmitters in their system. So what this means is that if you have the genetic predisposition, it's really important to tell your kids. You might be able to use the exact same amount of a substance that somebody else does, but all you have to do is use up to that threshold, and your brain starts making those structural changes. Whereas other people have to use a little bit more to actually get to their threshold, which is where their brain might. Now, this chart and a story that illustrates it is actually in chapter 2 under how the brain gets trapped by addiction. Now, I want to show you what happens to the frontal lobe. So here's problem number 2. This is a beautiful study done by Volkan and Nida many years ago, but it's a beautiful illustration. It's an fMRI study looking from the top of the brain down. And so the frontal lobes are right up here at the top. Color indicates brain activity. So the darker, the more activity. The guy at the top, his brain scan was taken 1 second apart, and his brain is completely substance-free, sober. All of the lobes are on and working together. Even the limbic system in there, it's all on but regulated. The man at the bottom ingested cocaine as a part of this study. And you'll notice that the back part of the brain and the limbic system, those parts stay on, but the frontal lobe shuts off. So what happens is that brain is flooded with dopamine. We might experience this when we do some binge eating of sugar-dense, high-calorie foods. We kind of affectionately call it a food coma. When we're in a food coma, we don't really want to do all of those executive functioning, higher-level, empathic conversations, impulse control, problem-solving, decision-making, because our brain is flooded with dopamine from that sugary, dense, high-calorie foods. But if you multiply that times 300, 400, 1,000 from substance use, you can see those people are high or intoxicated. The frontal lobe is shutting off during that time. Now, another thing also happens when we're scared. When we're really, really terrified or scared for our life, our limbic system lights up and mobilizes us for the fight or flight, freeze, or fawn response. It takes all the electrical activity from the frontal lobe, which is really not needed in those situations, and moves it into this part of the brain. So this is also what your brain might look like on fear. Now, I want you to think about this. If your frontal lobe is off in any shape, manner, or form while it's growing, it doesn't get to grow and develop like it should. We call that arrested development, or the new fancy term is hypofrontality. And so we want to make sure that this does not happen. Somebody starts using at 12. They use pretty consistently until 20. They're getting sober and we take a picture of their brain. Frontal lobe will not look like that one. It may look more like that 16-year-olds or maybe even the 12-year-olds, depending upon how frequently and how much they used. The scary part is, what if that kiddo that doesn't stop until 25, 30, 35, 40 and beyond? The executive functioning skills that should have peaked at 25 will peak so much lower. And that's what they have as a baseline for the rest of their lives. Good news is, remember, we grow dendrites for the rest of our lives if we use them. So it's very important to know that we can practice and grow those executive functioning skills well into our adulthood if we use them and practice them. Okay, somebody asked in the Q&A, how does screen time and social media affect dopamine levels? I've seen lots of studies on this, and I want you to know that in my book, Video Game Addiction and Technology Overuse, are 2 out of the 18 high-risk behaviors that I did a literature review on to figure out what does these things, how is are those affecting brain development. Now, it's really hard to find one particular study. There's so many different types of video games and social media, but there's a lot of research out there that shows it increases dopamine levels too high. And in many instances, technology companies hire addiction researchers to figure out how to spike dopamine levels high as they possibly can get. There was a study published in 2018 that said a half-hour viewing of pornography could spike dopamine levels up to 350%. Remember, that's what cocaine goes up to. I haven't seen specific studies that give us percentages, but we do know that a lot of them can go way above our threshold and cause addiction in the very exact same way, just a little bit different in different parts of the brain and different neurochemicals, but cause the same types of symptoms. What's important to remember about this is that once you cross those lines, it takes a long time to heal. So this is another beautiful NIDA study that shows you that progression of the cocaine abuser 10 days sober and then 100 days. You can see his frontal lobe is just starting to turn back on over 3 months out. It takes about 18 months for this brain to return to this normal level of functioning. But remember, they have new set points in their brain, but at least the frontal lobe is turning back on. The scary part, though, is how much treatment do you get within that 18 months? You know, usually at this 100-day place, we've already been discharged from our rehab and maybe are in an aftercare program. So we need to support these brains as they're healing in a way that really thinks about an entire 18 months. We know for kids, it could be anywhere from 6 months to 9 months for that brain to turn back on because we're still within a window of plasticity. So this gives you guys scientific justification to be your child's frontal lobe until they grow one of their own and to protect it. So if a child is not protecting their frontal lobe by using substances or engaging in risky behavior, you have neuroscientific justification to say, kiddo, if you're not going to protect your frontal lobe development, then I have to step in and require you to, with rules and limits and consequences. We do want to give consequences for substance use, but we also want to make sure they have treatment, that we get them into a lot of rewarding activities that reward sobriety, as well as giving appropriate consequences for hurting their brain development. Okay, So now we're at the halfway point of the presentation. And here you go. Oh, I want to pause for a second because I got a great question just came in. Can a brain totally heal? It's such a great question. And as a therapist, I so want to say yes to that. I don't have a lot of scientific proof, but I am 34 years sober myself. And I think that I'm pretty healed. And I've seen in my recovery, I go to meetings, I sponsor, I'm in the deal. I've seen so many people heal in such beautiful ways. But I have to say, you guys, we have so many drugs out there, fentanyl, these high potency THC products that are causing cannabis-induced psychosis. And I see so many kids today who are not coming back from CIP, cannabis-induced psychosis. So I just really want you guys to hear that, yes, the brain can heal, but it really depends upon the kind of assault that the brain goes through. Really good question. Okay, so let's move on. I want to show you guys some discrete studies that really illustrate this point. This is a beautiful one that shows two 15-year-olds in a scan while doing a memory task. The second one is a heavy drinker who'd been drinking for a couple years, according to this study. And what you see just on the surface is that our non-drinker has a lot more brain activity that's showing up on this scan than our heavy drinker. But look at the more subtle differences, you guys. You can see those really cool wrinkles and funky grooves in the brain growing for our non-drinker, networks that are squishing down in there, but that's not happening for our heavy drinker. He's got some major diffuse arrested development. This study came from the Amen Clinic. It's a SPECT scan. And looking from the bottom up, and on a SPECT scan, it's so cool. You can see the dendrites connecting, all your neurons. If they're really well connected, you're going to see a nice smooth scan. And on these two scans of marijuana users who smoked the bud, the green leafy bud, for a couple years, is areas that haven't been connected yet. They're not holes. They're just areas that haven't fully developed yet. So scary to see what looks like a hole where the frontal lobes should be. If we look at technology, this is a study that illustrates brain connectivity for two groups of students. The first group was a group of students who used recreational technology for less than a couple hours a day. And if you connected all the red dots, you'd see their connectivity, all a well-rounded brain. The purple lines indicate the brain connectivity of a group of adolescents who dropped out of high school and spent 12 or more hours a day at the internet cafe. Now, what you'll notice is an area of dense connections right there on top of the brain. Now, this is interesting because they're using this part. They're growing lots of connections. What is that? Well, that is the sensory and motor cortex right there on top of the brain. That's the skills they're using the most. They have one networked area that's showing up on these scans into their frontal lobe, which is so scary because they should have quite a few more networks into that area, but they're not using that part of the brain. So think about that. What kind of a parent or an employee are these guys going to make once they hit 25 years old? They're not using those problem-solving, decision-making, abstract reasoning, empathy networks. Let's look at mental health. Over here on the left is a scan looking at the side of the brain of somebody who, I hate the word healthy because I don't know how healthy this person is, but what they don't have is depression. And this is what a brain would look like if it's all on and working together. The brain scan on the right is of somebody who has chronic depression. And if you've ever experienced depression, which most of us have, at least a little bit, if not, a fully fledged depressive episode, at least once in our lives, you know that it's almost like the lights are off, right? And if you love someone with depression, it feels like that. The frontal lobe is just off. They're surviving, but the part of the brain that governs the, those higher level skills and your personality, it's kind of gone for a while, not completely. Here's a study that illustrates healing from the top down. A person who was depressed and went to about 6 to 8 weeks of therapy plus a medication, you can see that the whole brain's turning back on, especially right there at the top. That frontal lobe is lighting up like a Christmas tree. This is an amazing scan of somebody who had a panic attack while in an MRI. And you can see their limbic system. There's the amygdala right there. The limbic system is lit up. The occipital lobe, which is in the back, connected to the eyes, that's looking around like, how do I get out of this? What's going on? It's white hot from the top. Frontal lobe off. This is what happens when we're afraid. When we start to experience panic, our frontal lobe shuts off and we move into fight, flight, freeze, or befriend mode. One more brain study to really illustrate the power of what teens are going through. You guys know that at no other developmental life span stage do we or are we as susceptible to peer pressure as we are when we're teenagers. But then let's multiply that times social media. This was an amazing study. They had kids looking at this picture with 6 likes, and they saw not much happening in those frontal lobes. And when you ask the kids, well, what do you think about this picture of somebody drinking and driving? They're like, don't do it. Duh, no brainer. Literally no brainer. But when they increase the amount of likes, you see a lot more activity. And when you ask the kids, okay, now what do you think? Once they realize the picture hasn't changed, just the amount of likes, they say things like, well, if more people like it, maybe it's not such a bad activity after all. So scary. So when your children do earn social media, the operative word here is earn it. A lot of parents ask me, how old should my child be? Your child's frontal lobe should be smart enough to use social media and a smartphone responsibly. That's how old. And if they don't, they're not really ready for that technology. But this also tells us we need to set expectations for how our kids act online. There's some pretty amazing studies out there that show the more kids like and glamorize pictures of substance use, the more they actually engage in it themselves too. Okay, let's round the corner into solution. Let's talk about prevention and recovery. So start thinking about your questions, put them in the Q&A, and we will start answering those. When I wrote the Neuro Whereabouts Guide, I wanted to put as many clinical and parenting tools as I could. And I don't have a whole lot of time to describe these, but I'm going to go through and then I'll show you the website that the book is based on. Here are the 18 high-risk behaviors that I spent 4 years doing literature reviews on. How do these affect the brain? This is your to-do list. This is what you should talk with your kids about. And in the book, I put them in order of appearance. When do they spike? And I put a graph so that you know when they spike, so that you will feel empowered to have the conversation beforehand. And then when you're like, I got to talk about this now, what do I say? There's a script and a checklist that has really easy to follow. No topic spans more than 2 to 4 pages. Easy to follow information. It's a very infographic-y book. What I did was I studied about 65 years of prevention research, and I put into the book what you can do on a daily basis to use those principles in preventing kids from engaging. So a few of them we're going to go over here. There are more in the book. One of the most important things is consistently give education. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. Make sure they're active in pro-socials. Tell your kids you have to be in a club, a sport, or a job for spring, fall, and summer. And if you don't choose it, I'm going to choose it. Your brain needs to be busy growing long networks for pro-social skills and not getting bored and trying risky behavior. Use your brain-based praise. We'll talk about family dinners and how protective they are. I want you to create a family code. And when they don't follow it, give consequences. make sure you and your kids get active in the community. Take your kids on a mission trip. Go down to the soup kitchen, serve, make PB&Js for the homeless people in your neighborhood. Get them activated in that frontal lobe with lots of empathy and abstract reasoning. I can't tell you how different kids are when they come back from mission trips, because they can see what kind of a life we have compared to what's happening across the world, especially now. And then make sure that when they don't follow the rules, especially with substances or risky behavior, that we treat those problems pretty quickly. So in the book, I've got a lot of executive functioning skills scripts so that you know. Now, please read these and make them your own hip, slick, and cool language so that it doesn't like sound very therapeutic, right? Follow the functional family rule. Talk, trust, deal, feel. What you can do when your kid says, "Oh, Dad, I don't want to talk about that." Too bad, kid. In our family, we talk about things. We trust each other. We feel our feelings and we deal. I need 10 minutes of your time. I got a great book with lots of good pictures. Let's talk about this. Make it really easy. Let them know this is what we do. We don't push anything under the rug. Teach your children how to be emotionally literate. In my book, I have a feel what you feel wall, or you could buy a bag of kimochis, which is Japanese for the word feeling. I have these in a bowl in my office, and kids come in and they take one out, put it on your kitchen table, pass them around during dinner. Use these. You want to teach kids how to be emotionally literate. On my website, Know Your Neuro, I have a K-2 video called My Feelings. Let me teach you the 2-step process for being emotionally literate. Step 1, identify your feeling. Step 2, ask your body, what does this feeling mean that I need or want? If I'm hungry, I need to eat. If I'm sad, I want a hug. If I'm mad, I need a timeout, or I want to go call a friend. Teach your kids these steps. What are you feeling? And what does this say you need or you want? If you do this, if you allow and really teach kids how to feel their feels, they won't smoke them away. They won't drink them away when they start to experience those feelings. Create a family code. In our family, we treat others with kindness, compassion, and respect on and offline. We take care of our brain development. We don't use drugs ever and only drink when we're 21. I have done this family code building workshops at churches, at schools, all kinds of different coalition events. Have a fun family code building activity in your coalition. Bring in families as kids as young as 7 and above. Give them a poster board and take them through the activity guide that's in my tools chapter. 3 steps, so easy. Teach them about the brain and why this is important. Then you're going to put this family code on the wall and refer to it at family dinners, which are protective. The Family Dinner Project website is a great resource for finding questions to ask during dinner. But what you also should know is that the more meals we eat together, the more protected, the more unified kids feel, and the less risky behavior that they engage in. Use the conversation starter calendar that's in my book or on my website. This is what it's going to sound like. Everybody's at family dinner. You've passed around the roast beef. You've passed around the kimochis. Everybody shared how they felt and what they loved and hated about their day. Then you're going to say, hey, did you guys know it's National Eating Disorders Week? Your kids are going to be like, what are you talking about, Mother? And then you simply say, well, have you guys known anybody who has an eating disorder? You're going to follow the next important, very, very clinical therapeutic intervention. It's called duct tape therapy. Imagine putting a big piece of duct tape. Stop talking. Parents talk too much. Ask a question and wait. If your kids are like, no, I don't know anybody who has an eating disorder. Wonderful. If you want to know about it, let me know. Check. Now we're going to go next year. We're going to talk about that as you guys get older in your mind. Then in about 4 weeks, 5 weeks, you look on the calendar and say, hey, did you guys know it's National Smokeout Day? your kids are going to go, what, mother, are you talking about? And then you simply say, yeah, today's the day that people who get trapped by nicotine, they try to quit it. You guys know anybody who vapes? Duct tape. Then when your kid says, oh yeah, Johnny got kicked out of school today for vaping or last week, then you're going to use the second most important therapeutic intervention, the 3 magic words. What are the 3 magic words? Tell me more. It's not I love you. They know we love them. Tell me more. You're just going to simply say, tell me more. And he's going to tell you all about how Johnny got kicked out. And then you're going to say, well, that wouldn't happen in our family because we have a family code that says we protect our brain. And then next year, when your 11-year-old says, oh yeah, Sally has anorexia, again, tell me more. And then after she does, you're going to say, well, that wouldn't happen in our family because we protect our brain's development. It hurts our brain. But you know what, kiddo, if you ever get a craving or some body image issues, come talk to us about it. We'll make sure we get you help that you need, or, that you actually know some more information about it. A lot of times kids will say, but what happens if I break the family code? Which they will, right? That's when you say, I totally understand that, kid. But if you break the code and you engage in a risky behavior and you call me and let me know, your consequence will be so much smaller. But if I hear from somebody else besides you, like a teacher, another parent, a police officer, your consequence will double or triple. Yep, it's gonna bite. So please be a good representative of our family code. When they're going off to a sleepover, make sure you say, okay, kid, what's the family code? Be a good rep of our family. If your kid repeats the code really begrudgingly, that should be music to your ears. You want them to know your expectation. When I went to a party when I was 12 years old and about 10 months, somebody offered me a beer. And unfortunately, I drank it. But I remember thinking, oh, well, my mom hasn't talked to me about this. I knew I probably shouldn't do that, but I didn't know my parents' expectations. The research shows that when kids know their expectations from their family, they are statistically significantly more likely to follow the code and say no. Okay, so a few more of the tools in the book. Alcohol poisoning card. When they go to parties, cut this out, put it in their wallet or purse. Activity pyramid to help them balance out tech time with activities that they should do. So helping them know what kind and how much. There's a talk for every risky behavior in the book with some fun activity to do. This is one of my favorites, the pornography talks, because the average age of first exposure is 8 and 9 today. We need to talk about this younger and younger and younger. That's why I put the information into developmentally appropriate language. Teach kids how to critically analyze the media, what a medicine is, what a medicine is not. Use the tools in the book when they earn the smartphone, when they earn a car, to set valuable limits. Remember, these are here because they will lose those things. You need to make sure that you follow through with what you stipulate. Make sure that you use the whereabouts log scripts. When kids start going on slumber parties, that what I have here is a script that says, hey, since our kids are going to be spending time together, let's get on the same page. And some questions that you can ask your kids, friends, parents, so that everybody tribes together and keeps kids safe at everybody else's houses. Make sure that when they turn 12, that you start random drug testing. There's a lot of research on this, and a lot of different agencies are against it and some are for it, but I've read a lot of the research on it. And what I've found is that it is one of the #1 refusal skills that you can give a kid. The #1 reason why kids say, I didn't use, my mom would kill me if I did. And this is one of the ways that you can tell your children, this is not what I want you to do. And on their 12th birthday, you're going to give them all their presents and a cup that has a red ribbon on it. And you're going to say, guess what? I'm giving you the #1 refusal skill, drug testing randomly throughout middle school and high school, maybe in college if you earn it. We're just going to do it once in a while, randomly. That way, when you go to a party or you get to an event and somebody tries to offer you something or to get you engaged in something, you're going to say, no, my dad drug tests me. Oh, my school drug tests me. Nope. Throw them under the bus. Absolutely okay. There's information in the book in the tools chapter about how to do this, where to get good reputable tests, what to say, what to do to walk you through this weird, awkward thing to do with your kids. But make sure that you start this young. When you start it when they're older, because they've earned it, it's a little bit more awkward. Responsible drinking formula, teach this to kids, especially when they're going off to college. You may even want to teach this to some adults who don't do it. And then if they have problems, make sure you use the behavior modification contract, which is right here, a sample, and there's a blank one in the form too. But I highly recommend seeing a clinician when you're at this stage to help you. All right, you guys, so that is my presentation, just a little bit of a taste of what's in the Neuro Whereabouts Guide. I'm going to pause here for a second and answer some questions. Before I stop sharing this and show you the website, I wanted you to see that the Neuro Whereabouts Guide is available in English and Spanish. It's also on Audible. I warn you, it's a 400-page book, so you'll listen to me talk for about 14 hours. But remember, this book is designed to take you through your kids' development from birth all the way to college. There's tools that you can use. You can teach your kids when they have kids, right? These are great Christmas gifts for your grandchildren. And my information is also here. I have a professional website that has all of my publications on it. The prevention website is called knowyourneuro.org, and the book has a website, Neuro Whereabouts Guide, that has a link to all of the available formats, including ebook. And then there's my email address. Any questions? Nancy, Alice, did any come in the Q&A while I wasn't looking?
No, you've answered all the questions that have come in, Crystal, and I gave you a list of the questions before, and mostly I think you did a really good job in terms of the technology, but it says, so limiting screen time. I think that's a question that a lot of parents want to understand is how do you limit screen time?
So in the book, in the tools section, and every single chapter, elementary, middle, and high school, there's something about digital dangers. And 2 different places in the book, I actually have the American Pediatric Society's screen time guidelines. So what you want to think about is that we grow dendrites when we engage in an activity for about 3 to 4 hours consecutively. So if you want to get really good at playing soccer, you practice for 3 or 4 hours at a time. If you want to get really good at playing Fortnite, you play for 3 or 4 hours at a time. I think you're getting the gist, right? What we want to do is use good screen time guidelines for elementary school. Elementary school, no more than 1 to 2 hours consecutive. For middle school, no more than 2 to 3, and for high school, no more than 3 to 4 consecutive. Keep it on the weekend. Let them earn it. Maybe they earn 3 hours on Saturday and 3 hours on Sunday. Once they get off, then follow that up with the brain-based rule. Sorry, the brain balance rule. Brain balance rule says, if you are on a video game for 3 hours, now you have to get off and go do something else to balance your brain out. And the activity pyramid should be on the fridge. So when your kid says, I don't know what to do, I'm bored, the activity pyramid's on the fridge, kid. Go figure it out. Don't solve that problem for them. Make sure that they do that on their own. And if they try to get into a power struggle, on page 122, I've got all about how to deal with power struggle worms. Don't bite it. As soon as they dip a power struggle worm into the water, if you bite it, now you are the fish and they're reeling you in. They're the fishermen. So that's why I have these really cute worm here to help you remember. And there's some examples of what those sound like. Remember that kids start to argue incessantly when they develop abstract conceptual understanding. They're supposed to. Arguing is actually a sign of healthy brain development. You don't have to bite the worm, though. There's a lot of cool things that you can say instead of engaging in a power struggle with them.
So Crystal, to continue, you're talking about power struggle and screen time. There's a parent here who asked about kids who are playing video games and socializing, right? That's a big thing right now, is teens are gaming and meeting people, and you don't know who the person is on the other side of that game console.
You don't. And that's why in the elementary and middle school chapters, I talk about digital dangers and how to protect your kids from that. But that really is going to be up to you. Remember that a 10-year-old kid has 5% of their frontal lobe, which means they have 5% impulse control. You cannot possibly think that they know how or will take care of themselves and their safety on a game like that. So it's important to make sure that those games are out in the open, that you see what's going on, that you may not ever know who you're playing with or where, but that your child knows what they can and can't say on that line. And then that they use the screen time guidelines and the brain balance rule to balance that out. You want to make sure they don't use loot boxes and things like that. I've got a great technology presentation. It's actually available for free on Operation Parent if you want to see that hour. But, it's interesting. Somebody asked about legislation, and we're starting to see it. We're starting to see, you guys probably heard on NPR this week that there is some legislation against Meta for creating things that have, hurt kids. And actually, I just got hired by the Archdiocese of Houston-Galveston region. I'm in Houston, and to go around to the Catholic schools here and to give that hour presentation on tech to schools, because they are going no smartphones in their schools. It's really wonderful. We know it has such a deleterious effect on learning and all kinds of brain function and memory. And so glad to start seeing that. So you guys have scientific justification to reduce screen time in your household. Cell phone should not be in the room. Don't make sure they use an analog alarm clock or a digital alarm clock instead of the phone for an alarm clock. So phones can be kept into parents' rooms or cell phone baskets. They're going to be upset, and especially if you give in to them, but they can lose them, right? Once kids have it, you can dial it back. If they get in trouble or grades go down or you see depression or anxiety increase, you can say, depression and anxiety are linked to more screen time. So we're going to get you a dumb phone. And I have to say, Snapchat, I hate Snapchat. It's the number one way kids get drugs, kids and adults. Number one way that kids and adults get drugs is through Snapchat. Anything that disappears, not good. So, but there are other social media sites that are so much more acceptable and healthy. You have to be included, though, and teach your kids how to keep themselves safe. Great questions.
So I wanted to ask you, somebody in the, when they registered, asked a question with regard to special needs. And we really have two populations, special needs populations and LGBTQ teens. And if you could speak to both of them.
So much. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes. And so I've done my program. When I first started off, my dissertation was on a program called Choices. Choices is done here in Houston in many forms. And we did it in a couple schools for kids who had learning difficulties. So I really researched this a lot. And a lot of times kids are more victims of high risk behavior than perpetrators of it. But I think it's really important to teach kids these things so much earlier, especially if they have learning difficulties or developmental delays, because these are executive functioning skill deficits. But remember the brain's rule, use it or lose it. So if you're a parent with a kid who has LD or any kind of spectrum issue or developmental problem, please memorize those executive functioning skills early and start figuring out how to integrate more of those lessons and brain-based praise into your kid's life. Now, LGBTQ populations and transgender kiddos, they suffer from more anxiety and depression and suicide risk than the general population. Obviously, we understand why. And so making sure they have safe places to go. And there are so many great resources out there for that on my website. I'm actually going to stop sharing right now so I can show the website, because I have a
Yes.
lot of resources for kids on that. So let me just pop that up really quick, and then I will share again. Okay, here is Know Your Neuro. Can you guys see that? Okay, good. So knowyourneuro.org is a free prevention program that is really designed for schools, families, and students. So you can find the information via topics, skills, or videos. I'm just going to show you real quick. Here are all the topics. Each page, I'm just going to pop on down to, let's look at e-cigs. On this page, you're going to find all the videos for each age group, K all the way up through 12, with a one-page activity guide that gives you discussion, quiz, questions, all kind of stuff that you can do at home or in schools, and some other resources and activities that you can do at home or kids can do in class. One of my favorite websites that talk about that issue, and then they can also take a quiz if they're curious, if they've already started using, and lots of other resources for what's going on in the world. But they're also the skills. So all the executive functioning skills, and I'm going to be adding more and more videos for these. So you can, number one, keep that brain on by growing, keep the brain on by protecting it from all of these risky issues. Number two, use it or lose it. Work on increasing executive functioning skills and using those skills more often. Now, if you just want to use the videos and you just want to go to age, you can go to the video page and you can see I have all of the videos for each age group, right? There's the My Feelings video for K through 2. And then, of course, the grade 3 through 5 and the grades 6 through 12. So you can see it gets developmentally more specific for each issue and risky behavior. Then there is a parent page and a school page. Let me go to the family page. Here is the calendar. So it'll give you a lot of different days. So if you want to go, oh, this week is this, or this month is National Bullying. You guys ever seen it happen and bring those up at school? Those are there for you. And on the family page, the drop downs are different. There'll be all of the information that you might want to know about healthy development, brain-based parenting, prevention, and shaping behavior. So if you go to those sections, you'll see the things that you might need. Here's a blank contract and some of the things that you might need and some resources for that particular issue. I have a lot of different resources for each particular subject, depending upon what's going on. If you're a school, I've got the information under the heading of the tiers and all of the different tier resources that you might see or need throughout that journey. And if you're a kid, there's a student page that will teach you how to start a group or be an influencer for these issues, or even do an internship with me. I've got a group of interns who are helping me write the Neuro Whereabouts Guide for teens. And I also have a brand new, I just got my my author copy today of Know Your Neuro, which is a kid's book that helps kids go on an adventure with the superhero. And I just want to show you real quick our superhero, who is Neuro, the brain. So here's a really good picture of, oh, I can't get it open. So in the book, they will go on adventure with Neuro. You can see him there. He's the superhero brain. Neuro has feelings. Neuro says no. Neuro explores body image, all the different things. So please, please, please keep an eye out for all the things that are here. There is a calendar which will be populated with where I'm going to be speaking and what all the prevention dates are. There's also a shop so you can get some of the information in the book laminated and posters and different things like that. So
Could you show
okay, more questions?
Yeah, could you show specifically where you showed us a lot about substances? Could you show specifically about both mental health issues and LGBTQ issues on your
Sure.
site?
So, well,
There's a whole tab, mental health.
Sure. Yeah, there's not a specific site for LGBTQ. There's not that particular page, But if you go to the specific page here, you're going to find resources. A couple of my favorite resources for LGBTQ, of course, are NAMI. They have a really good one. There's some other websites as well that are really, really good. The Jason Foundation and some other websites that kids might look at. One of my favorite ones too is Mental Health Toolbox from the MHA site. DBSA has a really great one. Mental Health Literacy. A lot of these places will share really good information on LGBTQ issues. And then, of course, there's screening tools for those particular things that are happening
So thank you.
with kids.
One of the questions that came in during the sign-in was balancing the issue of Chromebooks. They're on them all day at school. They're doing homework on them, and then they're relaxing on them. So what is the difference between academic time on the screen and gaming and socializing time? And how does a parent balance that? Because so much of a middle school and high schoolers' experiences are literally writing and reading on their Chromebook as well.
And so we're not going to be able to change that unless you choose a school that has no screens. And there are schools out there that are very old school and go to that. I think the important piece is the brain balance. And so teaching your kids that just screen time use is creating an unbalanced neuronal network for this. However, we use screens so much. We don't want to take those skills away. They need those skills, but they need to know how to balance it. That's why I really love the activity calendar, the activity pyramid. The University of Missouri let me reprint it in my book, but you can find it online so easily. It really teaches kids how to balance with different activities. And then you may have to require it. Go on a walk with them. Let them know this is not optional. Like, you've been on your Chromebook for 2 hours. Let's go for a walk for half an hour. We need to balance your brain. There needs to be cutoff times for homework to be done at a certain hour, at least 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, because the melatonin needs time in our brain to increase and enough time for us to get the adequate sleep when we need. And also, kids are spending more and more time on homework, getting distracted. It's taking double the time to do homework for many kids. So if you have a screen cutoff time and kids are like, I didn't get my homework done, too bad. That is a great natural consequence that they will learn how to get it done when screen times are cut off. Make sure that you have access to shut off every screen that your kid has access to. It's easier to do. All you have to do is call your internet provider, and you can get great software that gives you the ability to shut off screens individually. Make sure kids get adequate amounts of sleep. But this, some of these things come naturally for some kids, and other kids are going to fight us on that. So we need to make sure we instill the right kind of rules and guidelines with really good screen hygiene.
Thank you for talking about sleep, because sleep is such an important aspect, because they need that real downtime. And boredom.
Hold on, let me do because I actually have in a couple of the chapters sleep guidelines, like how much sleep should each kid get, right? And what factors into that, because that is such a big problem with kids and young adults today, I should say.
And boredom. Kids don't know how to be bored, so they're always surfing the net. There was one question that somebody asked, what are acceptable social media sites? So I'm going to leave you with that. And then universally, a lot of parents, when you talk about teenagers, you talk about mood swings. So maybe you could just sort of close out with good social media sites and how to handle the whole up and down of the teens' mood swing existence.
Okay. Oh, I remember that question. It was a really good question. Okay. Yeah. So one of my favorite resources is called Parent Protect. And it's such a great resource, really reasonable fee for a subscription. Now, Parent Protect, these young guys they look at all the pros and cons in literature for all the social media, all the websites, all the stuff that kids want to do. And they make videos for parents, which is great because we don't want to read a huge article. We just want the information in bites. And so if you subscribe to them, you can go onto their website and just look up, okay, what is a good site? Common Sense is great for that too. They make some really good reviews of different things that kids, but you have to make the decision of what's the best for your kid's frontal lobe. Because, you know, a 12-year-old may have the psychosocial maturity of a 14-year-old, but your other 12-year-old, you know, at a different time in development has the psychosocial maturity of a 10-year-old. So you've really got to make that different decision for each kid. And then the last one we'll end on is moods. So I think to remember that knowing your child's neuro whereabouts guide, or knowing your child's neuro whereabouts, knowing that when they're moody, they don't have enough emotion regulation and impulse control to control all of those. And that won't be fully online until literally they're 25. But that doesn't mean you have to be treated poorly. So I think it's important to do what I call a validation sandwich. And that is being able to say, kiddo, so here's the top piece of bread. It's a validation. Like, kiddo, I think you're so amazing and you're developing right on time. The middle meat of the sandwich is, it's not okay to treat me that way when you get moody. And then the last, you know, the second piece of bread in our validation sandwich is, but I really trust you to be appropriate to me, even when you're going through some raging hormonal moodiness. Right? So be able to validate, stamp of approval, valid on their forehead. You have a right to be here. You have a right to feel this way, but you don't have a right to treat me that way. Like, it's not okay. So one of the therapists, I cannot remember her name right now. It was like 20 years ago. I went to this class and she used this acronym RRF. You have a right to expect kids to be RRF, respectful, responsible, and fun to be with. And you can tell your kids that. Like, I have a right to expect for you to be respectful, responsible, and fun to be with. And dude, if you're not fun to be with right now, I can opt out. So can you, but I need you to get your stuff on so that we can go have some fun on this family vacation or this event. Yeah, I know you don't want to be here. I get it, but not much fun to be with right now. Can you change that for me? Thank you so much. That was really good emotion regulation. I appreciate that. Right. And not to expect perfection, because this is a journey, right? As they say in recovery, progress, not perfection. And what I say in my books is that, you know, it's not practice makes perfect. It's practice makes more dendrites. So keep rewarding dendrite growth and successive approximations to the rule. So Alice and Nancy, thank you guys so much. I just feel so honored to be able to be here with you guys tonight, and all of you who came online to see this. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. This was such a great presentation. I so wish I had that RRF tool when I was the parent of a teenager, but I will be able to share it with my daughter when her daughter becomes a teenager.
Exactly.
So
yes.
I'll leave it over to Nancy.
Thank you so much again, Dr. Collier, for being with us. We really appreciate all the amazing tools and tips and resources. We do ask that folks take a minute to scan that QR code and let us know what you think. This is really helpful for us in terms of our future planning. So please take a moment to do that now if you can. You'll also get a link to the survey when you get the recording as well. We also want to let you know that the next webinar will be coming up in January. It's on January 23rd. It's Dr. Ken Ginsberg. You can actually click on this QR code if you would like to remember to register, and register now. And with that, I'm going to say good evening to everybody. Please visit our website for additional information. You will be receiving a link again to the recording, and also to the tip jar. And thank you again, Dr. Collier, for being with us. We really appreciate you. Have a great night, everyone.
Great. Thanks, you guys.